All right, we now turn to pages 638 to 646. And what I did in the recording prior was I gave you a lot of big picture stuff, a lot of summary about what the overall point of that section was. I did that last time because the overall point is very important, and it's a little hard to see from the selection I gave you what she means there, and I think you'll agree with me on this. I didn't want to give you, say, 50 or 60 pages for that one point, which would have made it more clear, but then that'd be, half a week just on that. So what I'll do now for this section on women's situation and character is I'll give you a lot of specifics, not nearly as much general stuff. Part of why I'm doing that is, like I said, the general point last time was very important, but not really in any single line. It's how it all fits together. This section, though, is, as the section's title, it's about women's actual situation, right? The actual details about how women live, act, behave, feel, and how they're expected to live, act, behave, feel. So here the point is exactly, the devil is in the details on this one. So I'm going to sort of march through page by page and give you examples, and that's mostly what this recording is going to be about. Specific examples of real things that tend to fall more to women, tend not to fall as often to men, and when it's not crystal clear, I'll explain to you how that thing limits freedom or stifles freedom. Quick note before we get into it. Especially when I go rapid fire through it today, it may sound like I'm saying women are this way. Women are, in fact, always this way. Beauvoir and I never mean that women are always this way, but that this is how women tend to act, and so there's always exceptions. And also, as she says, she's saying, this is page 638, she says the things she's going to describe right now are suggested to women by their situation. It's not that women have some inner drive to do this stuff and to live this way. It's that you give women reduced freedom, and then their life takes on certain behaviors that sort of reproduce or replicate this limited freedom. So on page 645, she says, if you shut a woman up in a kitchen or a boudoir, you shouldn't be surprised that her horizon of freedom is limited. Her wings are cut, and then you blame her for not knowing how to fly. Instead, let a future be open to her, and she will no longer be obliged to settle in the present. She will fly. So when Beauvoir says, women do this, that's bad, men do that, which is good, she doesn't mean that, like, capital W, women are always that way, and capital M, men are always that way. It's that the way we live sort of squeezes us into these patterns of behavior. And if everyone were more free in the robust sense, and women had fewer limiting stereotypes about what they're supposed to be like, then we'd all live the good way. So again, this is not how women are for all time. It's sort of the trap or the rut that they're stuck in currently, and it's slowly getting better. It's just not perfect. Okay, so top of 639, Beauvoir says, women recognize that the universe as a whole has been shaped by men. Men rule it and still today dominate it. So for herself, a woman does not consider herself as responsible for the world as men are. She understands that she's dependent on others in this world rather than independent. And less often does she emerge as a free subject in front of other people in the group. She says that they're treated as eternal children. Big children, yes, but still like children. And that they accept without argument the truth and laws that men give them. Oh, sorry, she was... anyways, that's the general point. If you don't learn how to play with technology, Beauvoir says on 639, then you lack the tools to dominate matter in the world around you. So the world... Let me add a little more here. What Beauvoir means is that when women are young, we don't ask them to build stuff. We don't ask them to fix stuff and repair stuff. So little boys' toy set might include a workbench and like little fake hammers and little fake saws. right? And we don't have women trained or asked to do that same kind of work. Same thing, when you were younger, did you ever learn how to code or otherwise work with computers? Well, if you did, you're more likely to be a guy. Now there's all these things like programs for girls who code and whatnot. But again, that's lagging behind. It's a fix for exactly the problem that Beauvoir is describing. Now here's the thing is we do train women in real skills and real work when they're younger, when they're girls. But Beauvoir says look at the exact concrete details of the work. So if you train a boy to code on computers, what's he going to do? He's going to code and he's literally going to write new code that does something new. Maybe it's the code for a Google search, or maybe it's a code for Google Earth. I guess it's all Google nowadays, isn't it? Maybe you teach him how to do design, and he redesigns the new Apple so it looks sharper, right? But what are the sort of things that we train women to do? Sewing, cooking, taking care of children. Now, this is real work, and it's really difficult. And if you really like babies and you really like sewing, Beauvoir says, hey, you're free. You should do what you really like to do. But Beauvoir says, look at the content of these different kinds of work. So this is the middle of page 639. Cooking teaches you patience and passivity. It doesn't teach you to be impulsive and active. You must obey the fire and the water. Wait for the sugar to melt, the dough to rise, and the clothes to dry. Housework is not quite a technical activity that produces freedom, Beauvoir says, because it's too rudimentary and simple, too monotonous and repetitive to teach people about the real laws of mechanical causality. So her point here is that when you learn how to do these things, it's a real skill. But you're not learning how to go and innovate and create and make new things in the world. Instead of learning how to actively master the world, cooking, clothes, cleaning, child work, all that teaches you how to be attentive and responsive to other things and other people. The computer coder creates something new where literally there's nothing before. The cooker, the cleaner, the child care worker, they do the same stuff every day. And they do things that enable others to be free, rather than showing the freedom of the cooker, cleaner, child care worker. Literally, if your mom feeds you, she feeds you, and then you go out of the house and you do free stuff. But her freedom doesn't show up specifically in what you freely do outside of the house. It's like it's literally poured down the sink as she's cooking. Or actually, even more literally, you consume the freedom of the cook, the cleaner, the child care worker, in order to make your own freedom. And that means, they lose freedom as you gain freedom. She continues on, she says, look, clothes just get dirty. That's nothing the woman can control. Some spots come out, some don't. So it's unpredictable. Objects around the house just show up broken, and dust just shows up every day. So imagine the difference between being a politician and being a cleaner. The politician has to come up with something new every day. The politician has to engage with other politicians and try to compromise or force them into, voting for their bill, supporting their political policy. It's different every day, and it involves other people in a shared project trying to increase freedom. Same for the CEO. The CEO has to convince stockholders. There's always changes in the market. There's fluctuations in the prices of raw commodities. Every day is different when you have that kind of job. But if you have a job inside the house, every week you're going to need to dust. And every time you dust, it's going to be exactly the same as the last time. And there's no personal stamp that you can put on dusting. Cleaning the house is never going to be an expression of your individual capacity, because it's all about the house and, objective standards of cleanliness, nothing about your own personal stamp. Whereas Apple still today resembles the personal individual personality of Steve Jobs, right? America is still affected by the personal individual decisions that, say, Bill Clinton made, that George W. Bush made when they were in office. But no matter how good you are at cleaning your house, you don't show up as an individual. Your freedom does not express itself in cleaning the house. The house looks great. But if anybody cleaned the house, it would look the same. However, you have two different people as presidents. Oh, yeah. Two different people as CEOs. The company's going to go in a completely different direction, following their individual free choices. So here's Beauvoir's point, and we'll see this repeated with other examples coming up. You are free to do whatever you want. But you should know in advance that certain kinds of work are, for almost everyone, way less rewarding because they don't generate new freedom. They consume and use up freedom. Right? Taking care of someone's children, whether your own or someone else's. So my sister does preschool care. The personal stamp of that person very rarely shows up on the 4-year-old. But they spend all day literally taking care of other people's children, people who are going to be free later in the day. But where's the innovation? Where's the novelty? Where's the reward other than the general reward of doing something important? Steve Jobs got to do something important, and we still talk about his name. He got to hold press conferences every quarter to yak about what new innovation he'd come up with. Childcare workers do not get to hold press conferences and tell you about their innovations. Okay? So the general point is here is you can do whatever you want. Beauvoir is not against women doing childcare. She's against women being expected to do childcare, just as she'd be against anybody being expected to do childcare and cleaning and housework, because those are dead ends for freedom. Almost no one can truly express their individuality in doing monotonous, repetitive work that they have no control over and which is the same every day. So, as she says on 640, some work is ruled by routine. It has no dimension of novelty and no creative spring. It's doomed to repetition, and in it you can't see the future, in it all the future looks like is a duplication of the past. All of these are basically synonyms for bad, bad, bad for Beauvoir. You are dictated, you obey the rhythm of the months and the seasons, cycles of, say, pregnancy, of flowering, of dust, of the oven. Everything reproduces the preceding event identically. Time becomes slowly just slow degradation, slow decay. It eats at furniture and clothes, it disfigures the face, it destroys fertility. So what she says here is the kind of work we have women do more often than men ends up impacting their character or personality. So let me be clear. We're moving on to a related, but different point here. First point was that certain kinds of work are dead ends. They don't express freedom, but they sort of use up your freedom. Second point here is that kind of work then has bigger effects on the sort of total personality of the people who do it. So Beauvoir's point on 640 is that if you do work that just seems that every day is a repetition of the last day, and housework is like this, the work that women do in the home is like this, then you will eventually in your personality develop a fear of the future. If, on the other hand, you're doing sort of, quote, masculine work, you're outside of the house dealing with other people, you're trying to change and innovate, you're expressing your freedom, which by definition is always new every day, then you're going to love the future. You're going to embrace change in the future. So, as an example here, ask yourself, who is more daring, your mother or your father? Who is more adventuresome? Who, on the other hand, is more worrisome, as we see on page 645? So just do this for your parents, okay? So again, who of your mom or your dad is more excited about the future? Who is more adventuresome and more likely to take a risk? Okay? Who worries more in your family? Who talks about the past more in your family? Right? Who's more future focused and who's more past focused? Is anyone in your family, mom or dad, superstitious or believe in astrology or fortune card readers and things like that? Okay. Another way to put this kind of question is there someone in your family who is resigned to fate? Like when bad things happen, they just say, que sera, sera, what will be, will be. You don't have control over these things. And is there someone in your house who's more rebellious, a fighter, right? When things don't go their way, well, darn it, they're going to make them go their way. So this is a question I'm asking you and I'll put in the discussion board. Who of your mom or your dad is more excited about the future? Who's more scared of the future? Who worries more about what's going to happen? Who talks about the past more and who talks about the future more? Is anyone in your family superstitious, reads the astrological charts, goes to fortune tellers or tarot card readers or anything like that? And one way to sum up a lot of these is that when bad things happen, is someone in your family resigned? They just sort of accept it and shoulder the burden? And is there someone else in your family who's rebellious and says, oh, hell no, and fights back when things don't go their way? So pause the recording now and think about that. If you don't have a mom and a dad in your house, just expand the question to siblings, significant others, however you want to do it. But I do want you to do it with your mom and your dad if you can. So pause the recording and answer it for your parents if you can. Because here's the follow-up. Do you see that in yourself? If, say, dad was mostly on one side of those questions and mom was on the other, and you're a girl, do you see yourself lining up more on dad's side or more on mom's side? Because maybe, and I don't want to, well, here, pause the recording now and answer it for yourself, right? If there was a guy-girl split there, if there was a male-female split there and how those broke down, which side do you see yourself on? Okay, so answer that. Pause and answer that now, please. And now that you've answered for yourself, right? This is my rough prediction. And this would be in line with what Beauvoir would think as well. My rough prediction is going to be the adventuresome, rebellious, future-oriented risk-taking. If there's a difference in your family, it's likely that dad is more that way. The worrisome, past-oriented, resigned to fate, just putting your head down and bearing through things, that's going to be more on mom's side if there's a difference. And I predict that for a lot of students, they'll also sort of line up that way. But not as much as their parents. So it's a little hard to summarize, but basically I'm saying, I think that for a lot of parents, it's going to line up the way Beauvoir would expect. Guys are more future-oriented because they're trained to be that way. Women are more past-oriented and more resigned because they're trained to deal with what they're given rather than create something for themselves. But because that's not etched in stone, that's not like a genetic difference, it's going to be slowly changing where fewer of our female students are going to be quite as worried and past-oriented as their mom, and fewer of our male students are going to be quite as adventuresome and rebellious and all that as their dads. That basically male and female students will be closer together than moms and dads are. Male and female students, younger students, are more likely to resemble each other, whereas there's going to be this difference between mom and dad. And so basically the general Beauvoir point here is that things are getting better, but we're not identical in terms of freedom just yet. Once more, Beauvoir doesn't think that women have, like a weaker soul, or that their faculty of free will is weaker or something. She thinks if you show people a world in which it's men doing things and women dealing with what they're given, it's just called, it's like peer pressure. It's like role models. You develop part of your image of who you are and what you should be based on other people who you think look like you. Now, you could always change your mind about that, but the default position will often be you do something like what you've seen people like you do before. So in 641, she says, men know that they can reconstruct institutions, create another ethics, another code. Okay? Because when they look around, that's what they've seen men do throughout history. Now, lately, we expect women to do as much creating and innovating and freedom, basically, as men. And that's great. But if you look back at history and you're a guy, you see that people like you can do these things all the time. Abe Lincoln, George Washington, Pablo Picasso. If you're a woman, you see that humans can do this, and surely every woman knows she's a human. But don't you see it'd be a little less inspiring even in the present moment? It'd be a little less inspiring for most women even in the present moment, because when they look at history, they see people doing great things, but not necessarily as many people who they personally identify with. So this would be why even today fewer women go into politics. Fewer women go for those highest ranking jobs in business. Because they know technically they can, but they're probably a little less inspired than some of the guys are. And Beauvoir would say this applies to black Americans as well. Fewer role models means it's harder. It's still possible, but it's harder to get inspired. It's harder to stick with something that's difficult when you don't know for sure it's going to work out for you. But guys can feel in their gut a little more easier, and white people can feel in their guts a little more easily that it's going to work out for them because they've seen it work out for people like them so many times before. Now, once more, you see here, Beauvoir's not saying white people tell black people that they can't succeed. She's not saying men tell women you'll never be anything, so why try? It's nobody's fault, currently, that history is populated with mostly white guys doing stuff. Because we only used to let white guys do stuff, to be really overly simplistic about it. So it's nobody's fault in the present moment that history is filled with George Washington's and Abraham Lincoln freeing the slaves. Right? The point would be, though, so there's something we can do today. We can focus on those past and present women who are taking care of business. We can focus on those past and present black American heroes. Right? Not as a matter of being politically correct, not as a means of revising history, but just giving everyone as many options, as many inspiring options as possible, so that everyone can look at someone who works in the field that they want to be in. Technology, military, sports, arts, philosophy, and say, I know I can succeed because I've seen someone like me succeed before. So, I always see the optimistic and the negative side of philosophy. Here I'm emphasizing the optimistic side. Sexism and racism today are not the fault of individual people for Beauvoir, or at least that's not the main story. And yet, individuals still have a responsibility to themselves and to each other to try to enhance the freedom of all people. So male, female, black, white, Asian, whatever, gay, straight, Catholic, Hindi, whatever it may be. You have the responsibility to make sure everyone knows that they have role models, that everyone knows that the past needs to change and we all need to step up and own our freedom today. So you're not responsible for the past. You are responsible, though, for the future. So 643 going over to 644. This is maybe said a little bit less today, but not quite as much. Or it's still said. If we think that women are petty and frivolous and that women are obsessed with their looks and their body and how they appear to other people, what other people are saying, Beauvoir once more says, yes, that is in fact the case. Women are more frivolous. Like, look at all the YouTube videos about how to contour your face and all this hair tutorials and all this sort of stuff. That stuff is not that important. And women do that way more than men do. But Beauvoir says, you forced women to pay attention to that kind of stuff. 643 at the very bottom, she says, if woman appears to man as such a physical being, it's because her condition, that is the real conditions in which women tend to live, it's because her conditions incite her, that is, they cause her to attach a great deal of importance to her animal physical body. 644. Carnality, the carnal body, does not cry out any more strongly in her than the male, so she's not dominated by her body any more than the male is. But she watches out for its slightest signs and amplifies them. So the frivolous pursuits of some women has the same cause as her vanity, as her desire to be beautiful, her care for what other people say about her. She gives importance to these little things because she lacks full access to the big ones. Okay? These occupations of fixing her hair, working on her fitness, all this sort of stuff are occupations that are offered to people, useless ways to fill up time. If your time's already filled up with running a business, running a political organization, etc., you're not going to waste your time on things that are empty nearly as often. Okay, so that's the themes of this section of reading. Okay, we'll now end this recording, and then there's a last little bit from the conclusion, and we'll wrap it up. Thank you, everyone.